Hello and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Unsold Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Santhosh Venkatesh. And today we want to talk about a topic which is highly debatable in enterprise SaaS. The battle between product differentiation and brand differentiation. In a market where features can be replicated and pricing wars are unsustainable, how do companies truly stand out? So to talk about this, I have two extremely special guests joining us today. First up, it is Ranudi Jayasinghe from Sri Lanka. She is a product marketer and she champions product differentiation. And hopefully she's going to talk about how tangible product features and capabilities help us in creating a distinct advantage. And to represent the other side of the debate, I have Joe Daniels joining us from England, Sheffield, England, and he's a positioning expert. And Joe strongly believes in the long-lasting impact of brand differentiation. So hopefully he's going to talk to us about how creating and controlling industry narratives and thought leadership is going to help us create a distinct advantage in creating brand differentiation. Right. So get set for a highly invigorating conversation, which is going to challenge the conventional wisdom of B2B SaaS differentiation. And if you are a product marketer, brand marketer, business leader, founder, whoever you are, this conversation should at the very least, help you rethink your approach in helping your company stand out in the market. All right. Joe and RJ, thank you so much for giving us your time. How are you guys doing? Starting with you, Joe.
Thanks for having me. I'm good. It's ready to get stuck in.
Fantastic. Ranudi, how about you? How are you doing? Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great. It's great to get the chance to talk about these things, not on LinkedIn, lots of nuance gets lost in the comments and the posts. So this long form format, I hope we can really go deep into the issues.
Right. So one interesting point here is, dear listeners and viewers, is all of us happened to converge through one LinkedIn post and we exchanged a few comments and that led to this episode, recording this episode, which is an interesting point. Okay. All right. Now, let's begin with a very simple question. I'll start with you, Ranudi. Can you help us define product differentiation?
Yes. So for me, when it comes to product differentiation, I think a lot of people limit the definition of it to just product features. But how I like to see product differentiation is more similar to how I think April Dunford would define it, where you see a product as much more than just its features. And you also have product attributes. So this attribute could be, your service, your pricing model, the service, the complementary products that you sell with, like your core offering. It's much more than just a set of features. It gets to the level of like all the complementary things surrounding it. So for me, that's how I would define product differentiation.
Fantastic. And Joe, can you help us define brand differentiation?
Yeah, so I think a good definition is kind of to almost describe it as the opposite of what Ranudi's just said with the product side, which is like there comes a certain point where you're talking about something that's not related necessarily to the product directly, but is kind of indirectly associated with it. And so for me, that could range from anywhere from like the actual visual brand, which is obviously one part of it, but not all of it. Some people do make the mistake of thinking it's just visuals, but it is partly visuals. I'd say it's also things like what's your perspective and your point of view as a company on the problem that you're solving? Like what's your approach and belief around solving that problem? It also plays into things, I guess, like the founder's personal brand and stuff as well. That's quite big right now with the sort of founder-led branding. I guess it's anything that is wider than the product and more about the company, I suppose, would be how I'd describe it.
Fair. I mean, talking about, now we can sit here and talk about the brand side of the differentiation as well as the product side. Let's say if we look at it from a bias perspective, everything looks like a linear experience. First the brand, then the product, or directly the product, and then comes the brand. So is it a fair comment to say that buyers don't differentiate?
I think I think buyers don't explicitly differentiate in their mind. It really depends. So I think when it comes to product differentiation, that is something that buyers specifically look at. It's on their list of things that they consider when they're comparing two solutions against each other. So, does it have this feature? Does it have that feature? Well, this product has a flexible pricing model. That one's a one-time payment. This one gives us support free of charge. That one, it's an added cost. So when it comes to product differentiation, this is definitely something that the buyers notice and take into account. But I feel like when you look at Joe's side of things, when you get the brand differentiation, that might be more of a subconscious one where consumers are just drawn to you, not necessarily because they might specifically cognitively identify what is it specifically about you that's different, but it's based on vibes. They feel aligned with you as a brand.
That fantastic. Do you have anything to add, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some research that was done, and I can't remember who it was by, or I think it might have been Peep and his winter stuff, and he found that generally speaking, when buyers enter the market where they're ready to actually buy a product, that they kind of narrow it down to a few options almost instantaneously before they even start doing their homework. And I think for me, I think what I would see happen if a buyer is that it almost is that brand differentiation happens almost immediately, like Ranudi's saying, like it's almost been working in the back of their minds the whole way up to this point where they're ready to buy. And then once they enter the market and they become a bit more active in the market, then I think that's when they'd probably start looking at the product. So it's almost like, I think they probably don't see it as brand versus product. We do because that's our jobs. But I think they probably see it as, oh, well, I've narrowed it down to these few leading versions. That's probably because of brand. They wouldn't know that, but it probably is. And then as far as choosing which of those top contenders, then it probably comes down to the product. But again, they might not see it like that, I suppose. So I think we do, but they probably don't.
Fair enough. And by the way, is it okay if I reference you guys as RJ and JD?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
All right.
Maybe just thinking about the listeners, maybe you want to go with RJ and Joe because RJ and JD, it sounds similar. Just for clarity for the listeners, just thinking about that.
Taken.
Yeah. Call me whatever you want. I don't mind.
Fair enough. All right. RJ, I'll begin with you now. Can you give us the ideal scenario of a company where they can claim to have a differentiated product? Or let me put it in that way. How many companies can actually achieve this state? And can we talk about the limitations and the advantages or the pros and cons of it?
Yeah. So I'll start first with your question about an ideal scenario, what differentiation looks like from a product angle. So for me, I kind of see it as a continuum. There are degrees of differentiation that a product can have to other products, and it can range from something completely new. So these are the category creators, where it's a product that you've never seen before. We think maybe Uber, right? No one knew what ride sharing was, and they're one of the first to market. So that would be a product that's completely innovative, completely new, no one's ever heard of. And then obviously as more competitors enter the market and markets start to get saturated, you slowly see the feature parity build up. But even then, I feel that at first it's like a race for the features, right? So you've got Uber, and then there's a local one in Sri Lanka. I'm not sure. Other people might not be familiar, but to use a foreign example, so there's Uber and there's Lyft, right? And you've got the they reach the feature parity. But then eventually it comes to a point where features are not enough. You also have to go beyond pure features and focus on other attributes like how fast your drivers are arriving, or if you're talking about in the SaaS world, whether you offer services, whether you're like I said again, whether it's a subscription pricing model, yearly, monthly, how long the contracts are, things like that. So as markets get more saturated, these points of differentiation, I feel tend to get a little bit more dispersed. And I do recognize that it can be hard to kind of tie them all up nice and neatly into like one core point of differentiation. But I still think that these smaller areas of differentiation are powerful if you're focusing on targeting the right people who care about those points of differentiation the most. Again, like I am heavily influenced by April Darford. So I think if you're familiar with her work, you see a lot of that reflected in what I'm talking about today.
At the beginning of the conversation, we talked about how you also talked about feature parity and how easily it can be replicated. And especially when it comes to pricing as well, it is a race to the bottom. So how do you see, where do you see the challenges of creating the a true product differentiator?
Yes. So I think the biggest challenge in a crowded market is related to what I mentioned before, where your points of differentiation are getting a bit smaller and more dispersed. So building that into something that is thematically comprehensible to your target customers, and also identifying which target customers care about those points of differentiation, that I think is the most difficult part. But I don't think that it's that difficult to do if you have a close ear to your market, if you do your research, and if you're able to talk to your existing customers and understand where they see the most value in your product. But that is definitely the biggest challenge. I honestly truly believe that in SaaS, like no two products are the same, even though they might get to feature parity. True similarity where you've got identical products where nothing but like the logo color and their mascot is different. I don't think that is happening, and I don't think that will happen even with AI and outsourcing,
Right.
all of that. I really don't think that would happen. And the reason that I say that is because even if you look at like something very commoditized, right? Like, okay, think about selling strawberries, right? Like, okay, you can sell strawberries. One strawberry seller is no different from the other. But there's still also factors like proximity, right? Let's say there's a strawberry seller that's like 10 minutes walking distance from your house, and there's another one that's 20 minutes, right? If you're someone who cares about convenience, you go to the 10-minute one. But let's say the other strawberry seller has sustainable packaging. So you would go to the one who's further away just to get your hands on strawberries that don't have a negative impact on the environment. So I feel like the nature of basically the world is such that there's always points of differentiation that you can carve out within your product. But the challenge is basically that, like identifying those and then communicating that in a way that resonates with your target audience.
Right, fair. So what just to rephrase what you say, RJ, is that no software product or physical product can achieve the truly evolved status, because that evolution of the product itself is in the context of the audience, is in the context of the buyer. The more deeper we get into understanding our buyer, so we can unearth more and more opportunities to speak to that particular audience.
Exactly. And I would also say there's also more opportunities. So you uncover those opportunities by speaking to your buyers, but no software company can do everything at the same time. If you decide to develop a feature this quarter, there's another feature that you're abandoning and deprioritizing because of that. So because of the unique the environment that each company is in, it's never possible to evolve to the point where two products are exactly the same.
Fantastic. Actually, I remember a recent video I saw, I may get this wrong, by Philip Kotler, who said, where especially in the context of software products, where he says, if you are a software company, a product company, you have to run your business in two different rooms. In one room is your current product, what is bringing you money. In the other room will be your future product, which means you have to pay very close attention to your buyers. So I get the sense of what you're saying. And Joe, to shift the light and the focus towards the brand side, can you help us understand what is the ideal scenario? What is the ideal example of a brand achieving true differentiation?
Yeah, so I think I think the key thing is as well is to sort of get clear on differentiation too here, because like I think there are sometimes examples given on both the product and the brand side where the difference isn't actually different, it's kind of still better. So like in the example of like the faster car example that Ranudi gave with the Uber thing, I'd argue that's not really differentiation. It's just claiming to do something better than the competitors. And I think when I'm talking about differentiation, I'm almost talking about like you're the only real option if you want to solve a problem in that certain way. And I think how that relates to brand, I suppose, is that like to go back to that buyer journey of like it starts with them almost having that mental shortlist. You need to be on that shortlist to really be considered. And I think, you know, chances are, if we're talking about 3 spots, one of those at least is going to be the category leader, right? Like you're always going to be like, oh, we need a CRM. Let's immediately think of, you know, Salesforce, HubSpot, and so on. You're going to start thinking of those category leaders straight away. If you're not a category leader, then you've maybe got one spot potentially that you're fighting for in people's heads. So what you really need to do is dial down into, like Ranudi said, it's really important to dial down into a target customer, because the more you can do that, the more you can differentiate on both a product and a brand level in terms of what they need. But I think the key is you almost want to be seen as the only possible option for your target customers before they even really start comparing product to product, because at that point, it is a comparison game, and that's when the product differentiation comes in. But actually, if you can differentiate on a brand level, you're almost forcing that choice before they even start making it. Do you know, it's almost like actually before they even start comparing one strawberry to another strawberry, they already know that they want your strawberry. Do you know, it's almost like actually they've kind of already made their mind up before they've rationally made their mind up. And if you can achieve that through your brand, then I think it basically puts you in the winning position from the start of that conversation, I suppose.
Fine. Fair. Especially on the brand side, Joe and RJ, I'm very interested in understanding what you, especially Joe, with you, what do you hear from the market when you have conversations about the brand side of things? Any recollections, any anecdotes, any stories?
Do you mean in terms of like people I work with, or do you mean in terms of...
Yes, exactly.
I think what I hear from founders who I talk to that come to me, so you know, for context, I work with companies that are in very crowded markets, like Ranudi was talking about. Like, I kind of believe that if you are one of the first in a category, actually product differentiation makes a lot of sense, because you will have a different products by the very nature of that. In a crowded category, which is where I tend to operate, I think on one hand, I can see where Ranudi is coming from, in that like there will be subtle differences between different products. But I think the key is like, are they a big enough difference that it's really going to be a game changer for you? Like, or is it going to need something more than that? And you know, a lot of founders I speak to and marketers that I speak to are concerned that they are kind of playing that competition game of like, you know, they've got all these battle cards out and ready, and they're like, oh, you know, here's a matrix of our thing versus everyone else. And it's like, there's 20 different columns and rows going on. And like, from a buyer's perspective, when you're looking at that, it's like, I don't know which of these is right for me on a product level. You know, recently, for example, I'm starting a podcast of my own. Here's a cheeky plug. And so one of the things I had to do was like, well, what software do I use to record this podcast, right? And I was looking at these tools, and to me, I was like, they're all the same in terms of they all do what I need. So then it's like, well, how do I, you know, at that point, how do I choose? And I settled on Riverside because I think I knew the brand of Riverside. I was aware of them. They were one of my first choices in my head anyway when I came to picking it. And I think it's one of those things where like you can kind of try and post-rationalize it as a buyer, but realistically, that choice probably happened unconsciously because of the work that Riverside had done on their brand as a whole. Just answer the question. I don't know. I just rambled for a bit.
By and large, I think so. I think there's a nice segue to the next the question I want to talk about is, while we all agree that product differentiation is the ideal scenario you want to have. You want to be the category leader. You want your product to truly stand out, where very little is dependent on the brand side of brand marketing and stuff like that. But like you said, Joe, even in India, the early stage B2B SaaS companies I work with, some of them, or actually most of them, are in extremely crowded markets. And while everybody nods their head and agrees, saying that, of course, yes, we want to launch a podcast, we want to interview industry experts, we want to bring everybody, we want to hire a consulting agency to do some kind of survey or research, we want original content. But every now and then, or often, I run into a conversation where it becomes very difficult to track the impact in the short and the medium term of the brand side of the marketing. That remains a challenge. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean that I think it's funny because I genuinely believe, obviously that's why I'm here, is that brand is kind of underrated especially in the SaaS and tech world. I think it's not to say people don't get it, because I think that's doing people a disservice. I think they do. I think it's just that the budget allocation is often towards activities that are directly measurable and attributable to return on investment and so on, because I guess that's just the world we live in right now. But what I would always come back to is all of the brand stuff that I talk about and that other people, like myself, talk about is based on decades of research into this, and yes, it's hard to measure for you specifically as a company, but it's based on solid theory that was taught to people before I was born, right? It's not a new concept. It's a very old thing. And I think to just casually dismiss it as not relevant feels like a misstep. I'm not saying it's the only thing. You should definitely invest in short-term, more sort of campaign-based stuff as well. But I think my argument for brand is always that it's an enhancer. It's like a multiplier of success. So the more you establish a brand, actually the better all your other sort of performance marketing, growth marketing stuff will be, because you've got it underpinned by the brand, I suppose.
Fantastic. And coming back to you, RJ, what are some of the conversations you have in terms of product marketing? What is the sense of where the market is according to you?
What do you mean by, where the market is?
In terms of product marketing, whatever conversations you have, while it is understood that most attention, energy, and money and ad spend marketing budgets go towards product marketing, what is your sense of the place you work for or your clients,
right,
where brand versus product?
Yes. So honestly, I have to be in agreement with Joe here. Brand is underrated, and I think you need both. So you need to do product marketing, and then you need to use that, in my opinion, as the foundation for
Correct.
your brand. So even in terms of the feature or attributes that you have that are different, I believe that should lay the groundwork for everything that your brand is built on. I think a really good example of this is 37 Signals. So their recent release of Campfire and their whole stance on going against the subscription model. So their brand is something the identity is that of a rebel. They're tired of the subscription model. They're tired of being beholden to yearly or monthly contracts. And then what they've done is they've built this sort of rebellious maverick brand on top of that core differentiator. So I think exactly as Joe said, the brand piece is a multiplier of the core differentiation that you have within your offering. So I think in terms of product marketing specifically, because it's a bit of a newer field that's only now coming into the wider marketing zeitgeist, I think product marketing is also something that is misunderstood. People don't really understand my role, especially where I come from, Sri Lanka. You will get growth marketers and performance marketers by the dozen, but you won't really get product marketers at all. So I'm very lucky actually that I get to work in my current company that allows me to pursue that side of marketing, focusing on the positioning, messaging, enablement piece. But to conclude what you say, I think honestly both are underappreciated and not completely understood. And but really at the end of the day, they are the powerhouse that drives a product to market and then keeps it there.
I agree. I think by and large, probably forever, the brand and the product side of marketing will be like Christopher Nolan's movie where very few people get it, where most of us try and say, of course I understood. Of course I saw Tenet. Of course I understood everything. Of course I know time lineage and everything. All of that. So I get it. Joe, coming back to you, whenever I open up LinkedIn, there's no lack of education about even the product or the brand side of marketing to truly help people educate themselves about the fundamentals of the brand as well as product marketing. Coming up to brand marketing here, it's not there's a lack of content, lack of conversations going on. Yet, and also a point which you touched upon is that people know the value of creating a truly differentiated brand, yet there's always this constant conversation about questioning the ability or the capability of brand, right? So what can, if so much of education cannot crack that, what can move founders to truly sit back and say, investing in brand is truly setting the context for product marketing, like Anja said?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two strands to this. I think the first is kind of what we touched on before. You asked about, how do you measure the impact of it? And I think what's really important and what there's probably currently a lack of in SaaS, like, there's plenty of case studies of why brand is good outside of SaaS and tech, right? Like, like if I ask you to name some top brands, I'm sure you could do that easily, right? Like if off the top of your head in other categories, because that's the power of brand. And what I find quite funny sometimes is there's a lot of marketers in SaaS who, they'll use examples like Apple, right? And they'll be like, oh, Apple's got a great brand. Well, it's like, yeah, which is exactly why you should build a brand, right? Like it's like that you're using an example of a great brand, but then going, oh, but we don't want to do that, but we also do want to do that, and it's kind of this weird sort of like hypocritical thing going on. I think what we need more of is to share stories of successful brands in SaaS and be like, well, actually, look at what they're doing from a brand perspective. If it works for them, chances are it will work for you too. It's almost like the sense I get is that a lot of people in the SaaS world don't see brand as applicable to SaaS. They see it as SaaS is special in some way. Like it's this different as a category. And so the same rules don't apply. I don't believe that to be true. If anything, I think they need it more, because sometimes the products are so technical that actually wrapping it in a brand as well actually is a good thing to do. It humanizes it. It makes it more relatable. The second strand is also that it's hard. Like I think, both sides of this equation are hard to get right. I think the nice thing about product marketing is that it's very focused on a tangible thing that exists. So it's very easy to talk about the features and capabilities and the various things around our products because they're real and they're physical. You could, not physical, but they're tangible things that you can see and experience. A brand isn't that. A brand is very abstract and conceptual. And so it becomes a lot harder to talk about and to get right, I think, for that reason. And so I think often you see a lot of attempts at brand in the SaaS world that aren't very good. And I think are often then used to make the argument that brand doesn't work. And it's like, that's not the same. It's not a fair argument to point out a bad example and say therefore it doesn't work. But that does happen a lot, I think, in the SaaS world. So that needs to stop as well. So that's what I said.
Fair, I understand. And RJ, I would like to pose a question. Today, you spoke about growth marketers, the abundance of growth marketers and performance marketers. I think that I also share the same story in India. it is the case. Performance marketing and growth marketing, you can find people willing in everywhere. So if you were to be tasked to convince a business founder within your own organization or somewhere else to truly focus on product marketing, the positioning side, the messaging side, because at the end of the day, product marketing and brand marketing is nothing but simplifying the story in the most easily understandable language. And that's why, Joe, what you talked about, where Apple is most often quoted when it comes to brand building. And also there are so many SaaS products which say Uber of this category, or Ola of that category. So we see an interplay between brand and product. So RJ, coming back to you, how would you convince a founder to truly look into and invest on the product marketing side, the positioning, the messaging side?
Yes. So I think that that when it comes to especially startups, product marketing is absolutely critical, because aspects of product marketing is the core of making a startup successful, which is finding product market fit. You can't find product market fit if you don't find a way to communicate to the market the value that your product offers. But I do have a slightly controversial opinion in the product marketing circles on this topic. So a lot of product marketers say, the product marketer should be the first marketer you hire before demand gen, before growth, before performance marketing. And I actually disagree. I think that founders should do the product marketing at the early stages of startups, but hire growth, demand gen people to then distribute that message, because distribution is the biggest challenge, getting people to hear about you. And I think this is where brand also comes into play. Like Joe mentioned, like when you have a standout brand, it makes you more memorable to people. So I think you definitely need to focus on product marketing, but you don't always need to hire a full-time product marketer in-house. What I would do is I would convince them to get either fractional or I would convince them to get fractional help or pull in a consultant for specific product marketing activities, like mainly positioning, messaging, maybe research, and maybe a little bit of enablement, depends on like your specific scenario. But the way I would then go about convincing them that they need to, spend time, even if it's fractional or hiring a consultant, I would tell them that, look, you can never have a successful business until you find product market fit. So you have to do the work to get to that point before, you worry about conversion rates on your website or worry about whether you should turn a button blue or orange on a landing page.
Right. Fair enough. And Joe, coming to you, how would you, if at all you were to encounter a founder, and how would you convince him or her about investing on the brand side of marketing and truly creating a differentiated brand?
Yeah, I mean, for starters, I agree with your controversial opinion, really.
Right.
In fact, what I'd do is almost add to it and go a step further and be like, I think both the brand and product marketing sides that we've spoken about today are really just a fundamental marketing strategy, right? If marketing is basically how do we make people aware of what we're selling so that they want to buy it, then I think that's why brand and product are essentially two sides of the same coin. And I think at the heart of it is just what's our marketing strategy, right? And I think that's where the positioning comes into play. It's where the messaging comes into play. It's why in every other industry, that's really either the founder's job, like Ranudi's saying, or it's, the CMO's job is to figure that out, right? Like, not to bring in some other kind of marketer to do that job for them. Like that's ridiculous. Like it should be a fundamental business decision to be like, well, here's the market we're going after. Here's how our product's going to add value to that market. And I think that's why I'm always hesitant to actually call it brand marketing or product marketing, because to me it is kind of just marketing, right? It's like the fundamental it's just marketing 101. So I think when I talk to founders and try to, sell them in on brand, what I'm really trying to sell them in on is, let's go back to that initial marketing strategy, the business strategy of what are we selling? Who needs it the most? How are we going to get it in front of them? And then the answer becomes less about, is it brand or is it product? More, what's the most effective way to do it? And chances are it's a combination of brand and product marketing together. And I think it's almost just like take a step back to then make your journey forward easier, sort of thing. So I just
I think that's a very apt summarization of the interplay between brand and product marketing. At the end of the day, it is fundamentals of marketing. And right, final question to you both. With so much hype around AI, and which is lowering the barrier of developing new features in-house at enterprise companies, there have been conversations with where a B2B SaaS client of mine approached them with a revenue management platform. And this enterprise decided to build a feature and test it out on their own, because even though their primary resource engineering is not primarily used for this particular function of the business, but still they believe that it is worth experimenting before they make a decision. And maybe it will help them figure out to truly choose a vendor at the end of the tunnel to choose. So with artificial intelligence or the ability to create features and products becoming easier and easier, how do you see, RJ, this affecting or putting more emphasis on getting that product marketing side absolutely right?
I'm not a I'm not a product person, so I'm sure that someone who's like a product manager would have much more insights to offer regarding like the AI piece, whether you should, build or buy. Like that's a classic question. Do you get external solution or do you try to build it yourself? What I think is that in a context like this, product marketing obviously becomes all that much more important. Same can be said of brand marketing as well, because product marketing specifically is where you really nail down the value of your product. And it sounds very simple when you say it, right? Just, what's the value of your product? But when it comes to finding the value that your customers understand and resonate with, that's the tricky part. And the reason it's so tricky and the reason I think people underestimate it is because it involves so much psychology. It involves knowing what people think, what people feel. And that's always going to be a very complex, very nuanced thing. So in a world of AI and, people deciding to build solutions in-house rather than buy externally, I think product marketing is where you can really drill down on why it is better for them to buy your product rather than building it internally. And this can be through things like, emphasizing the time savings or the resource savings from deciding to buy versus build. But it can also be many other things depending on what your product is. But the important thing is you figure out what that thing is so that people aren't likely to fall back on what is essentially the safe option. Because at the end of the day, that's another reason people choose to build in-house. They believe in the engineers and they believe it's safer. They don't want to try something new. And really convincing people that your option is the safest option that's right for them. That's what product marketing helps you with.
Fair. I feel the same conversation, Joe. Talk about technology influencing content creation, thought leadership content creation. You talked about Riverside, and I use Riverside. We use Descript. The fact that editing audio and video has become not as complex anymore, what it used to be a few years ago, where you can treat an audio to studio-like quality on Descript within no time. So there's no lack of tools or opportunities to truly invest in creating thought leadership on the brand side of things. How do you see such technologies affecting this part of differentiating towards a brand?
No, it's a good question. I think we're already seeing that it's adding a lot of noise to like, I can't speak for you two, but my LinkedIn feed, it feels like the quality gets worse and worse every day in terms of like I have to work extra hard to really find the nuggets of like actual good content. But I think I'm just always an optimist with this sort of stuff. I don't know, but like it does feel like actually what it does is it means there's even more opportunity to actually cut through, right? Like if everyone's kind of just sort of pumping out the same mindless content, then it's even easier to stand out with content that's actually thoughtful and original. And I think, you mentioned thought leadership. I think a lot of people pretend to be a thought leader. And when you look at what they're saying, it's like, but you are just saying the same thing as everyone else. I think the true thought leaders that, say things that people disagree with are very few and far between. But I think if you take the time to figure out, well, what's your point of view? What's your perspective on the world you're in? And you can find that original take on it, then actually your content will naturally stand out by virtue of what you're saying. And so if anything, it makes it easier for everyone to talk, but it also means that it's easier to talk well. Do you know what I mean? Like it's
In one thing I've encountered often in India is early stage founders, especially in SaaS, enterprise SaaS, is there is this sense of fear or hesitation in truly taking a contrarian view, a point of view, not because you have to take a contrarian stand, but there has to be some element of truth there. But because so much of enterprise SaaS selling or marketing is based on reputation, they become very afraid about such opinions tainting their reputation and that impacting their business. That is one thing which I frequently encounter. Any thoughts on that on your side? Do you have such conversations?
Yes. So I think that fear is one of the biggest things to get over. As I think the way I see it is that if the aim is differentiation, you have to be aware that if you're going to be different, then there's going to be people that will disagree with you because I think otherwise you're not different. Do you know what I mean? Like if everyone's like, oh yeah, you're right, then it's like, well, when I post stuff on LinkedIn, I kind of want people to disagree with me. I welcome that, like not because I'm like a glutton for punishment or anything, but just because it's like, well, if people disagree with what I'm saying, then yes, I might be wrong, in which case I'll change my mind, or I believe something different to what they believe. And the fact that there's that difference in opinion means that it's differentiated content. Whereas if it's the kind of content that you see, like a lot of LinkedIn gurus posting where they get to the point that they could just churn out whatever they want, a lot of the time it's just loads of people going, yeah, I agree. Like, oh, well, that's not very interesting then, is it? Like you kind of like, I think there's a place for that healthy debate that I think, you don't want it to turn personal, sure. But like, I think debating ideas or concepts needs to happen more than it's happening currently. I think, I think that's how humanity develops, right? Is by disagreeing with each other and kind of getting to a new answer from that. So
absolutely. The one thing I do on LinkedIn is when you see a lot of reactions but very few comments, the great conversations are the ones who have those comments and the comments have replies and they live their own lives. And that is how we run into each other. I think those are truly remarkable learnings to have, different perspectives to gain. So I think this has been a truly remarkable conversation. Before we wrap up, I'll switch to you, RJ. Do you have anything else to add on to? Did we miss talking about anything?
Actually, so it's just to add on to what Joe said regarding in his answer to your question about, your POV, your being afraid. I think what would really help here with being certain in your point of view and not feeling like, you're going to lose out on customers or your audience is, again, basing that POV on your product. And again, I'm going to bring in the 37 sickness example here. The POV is based on the idea that you should only pay once for software, and like that, and that is baked into their product. It's not that they're saying one thing and doing another, right? Then you come across as a hypocrite. But because there's that alignment between their POV and their product, it comes across as super authentic, and that's really what resonates with people. So I think being controversial for the sake of being controversial is not a great idea. I just wrote a post about that yesterday. I think it really delegitimizes you in the eyes of your audience, and it can truly backfire. But if that POV is based on your actual feelings, your actual research, and your own actual logic, and then you can tie that to the product that you offer, and you truly believe that this way of doing things is going to help your target customer, that's where I think you just can't go wrong.
Right. It should come from a honest place with a lot of conviction. I 100%
Exactly.
agree. And maybe I think it's also fair that I had a conversation recently on my podcast, a senior product leader of nearly 25 years experience. He said about only 15% of B2B SaaS companies truly achieve product market fit. And maybe because there is so many similarities between a product and the competitors, it becomes truly hard for founders and business leaders to take a contrarian opinion or a stand or a POV, which is actually sort of based in truth. That broadly reflects the state of enterprise science, I suppose. Is it fair? Is it a fair comment? Arjun?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah. I mean, for starters, Ranudi is spot on. Like, it has to be true. Like, that's the key. Like, I think, like, you can't. There are some things where there is a right and wrong answer, and having a point of view based around the wrong answer clearly doesn't make any sense. Is finding the kind of the subjective areas and be like, well, actually, I can see both sides of this equation. I personally pick this side, but there could be others that pick that side. That's the interesting sort of grounds for a point of view. And I think, to answer the next question, I think the other thing to consider is that what today's contrarian point of view, if it's right, might become tomorrow's status quo point of view. Like, because that's the point, right? Like, is that, like Uber's going back to come back full circle. Uber's point of view was actually, you can just get in a stranger's car and they'll take you to where you need to go. Like, that's quite a weird point. At the time, it's like, oh, you're not going to get in a stranger's car. I trust the taxi companies, right? Like, I don't want to get into some random person's car. They managed to have that point of view, which was a contrarian point of view at the time. They lived it through with their products. Like Ranudi said, they linked it to actually, it is safe. We've got all these different safety features in our products that means it's safe. You'll feel safe doing it. And then now it's normal, right? Now it's like, oh, well, obviously you're just getting this stranger's car. If you'd said that 20 years ago, people would have thought you were crazy. And so I think it's that kind of, eventually your point of view might become a mainstream point of view, because in a way that's the aim, is that people eventually agree with you, but you're seen as the originator of it. Generally, that's the
Right.
key.
Fair. I think so. I think one thing which can help, if any of our listeners, early stage founders and business leaders who hesitate to have or share their point of view or opinion in the open world, especially on LinkedIn, I think what can help is when I stand alone and shout on top of the world my opinion and just wait for people to react, it might feel a little helpless. But if I host a conversation with another person from the industry, so that becomes a conversation. So it's not about a binary outcome of I am right, you are wrong, or you are right and I am wrong. It becomes more of a learning together. So that is where this amalgamation of different viewpoints coming together also checks that thought leadership box, also checks that some conversations lead to a brand new understanding about the market itself, about the buyer, about the end users, right? So wrapping up the conversation, Joe, anything we missed you wanted to add?
No, I don't think. I mean, I think just in addition to what you just said is that, as well as talking, I think a good way to validate your point of view is to run it by other people, in your industry, like you said. So like, talk to your peers and colleagues, and, if you're a founder, talk to other founders that you know, and kind of just test it out almost like in a conversation, because then if they're like, what are you talking about? And it's like, oh, well, maybe I should have put that on the website, right? And I think the same can also be said with conversations with customers and prospects too, is just try it out. Talk to some customers that are your target customers and say, oh, do you find this to be true? And sort of communicate what your hypothesis for your point of view. If they're like, oh, you know what? I've never even thought of that, but that's actually bang on. Then it's like, oh, great, cool. I should go and talk about that more. If they look at you and their eyes glaze over and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about, well, then maybe that's not the right point of view. So I think it doesn't have to be a big launch. You can test it and iterate and learn and develop. Like that's fine. And I think, yes, that's the same for all brand stuff. Realistically, I think it can be iterative. And I think when you see it like that, it becomes less of a gamble. That's all I've got to say now, I think.
Fair. I think it's you've reached a nice position to wrap up the conversation. Thank you so much, Joe and Ranudi, for giving us your precious time, and hope you both enjoyed the conversation as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
You